Imagine walking into a basement to find your friend sitting at his desk. He's dressed in his finest ceremonial robes. He looks ready to talk, ready to tell your fortune. The only problem? His head is on the floor. It wasn't just a murder. It was a performance. His severed head had been carefully placed so its dead eyes were staring up at a row of hanging wax puppets. Upstairs, his wife and 4 children lay in their beds, their bodies hacked into pieces. No footprints, no weapon, no motive. And nearly 100 years later, no one knows who did it. Before we descend into the great beyond of 1929 Detroit, if you have a morbid obsession with the cold cases that history tried to bury, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. We don't just tell stories here, we exhume the truth. Now let's get back to the story. 1929 Detroit was a city of steel and secrets. Among the thousands of immigrants was Benny Evangelist. By day, he was a quiet carpenter, a family man. But by night, he was the prophet. Benny wasn't just religious, he was obsessed. He wrote his own 4-volume occult Bible called The Oldest History of the World. He claimed to have seen the beginning of time and the end of souls. He built a thriving business as a healer and a mystic. People from all over the Midwest flocked to his home at 3587 St. Aubin Street. They weren't looking for carpentry, they were looking for miracles. And Benny performed them in his basement, a place he called the Great Beyond. It was a windowless, underground tomb decorated with green tapestries and filled with life-sized wax dolls that Benny claimed represented celestial spirits. It was an occult fever dream, and it was about to become a slaughterhouse. July 3rd, 1929. The Detroit heat was thick and suffocating. Vincent Elias, a friend of Benny's, walked onto the porch. He noticed the house was eerily silent. No children playing, no sounds from the kitchen. Elias pushed the door open. The smell hit him first. The iron scent of fresh blood mixed with the sweet, cloying aroma of Benny's ritual incense. He walked into the bedroom and found a scene that would break most men's minds. Benny's wife, Santina, and their 18-month-old daughter had been butchered in their sleep. Their throats weren't just cut, they were opened with such force the bone was visible. Elias ran to the next room. 3 more children, 3 more small bodies hacked to pieces. But the house was empty of life. He realized the prophet wasn't among the dead upstairs. Elias moved toward the basement door. He knew Benny spent his nights in the great beyond. He descended the stairs, his footsteps the only sound in the house of death. When he reached the bottom, he saw the puppets. Dozens of wax figures hanging from the ceiling, swaying in the draft. And there, at his desk, sat Benny Evangelist. He was seated upright, his arms resting on the table as if he were studying his occult texts. But where his head should have been, there was only a jagged stump. The killer hadn't just murdered Benny, they had performed a ritual. The head was on the floor, placed with surgical intent to face the hanging wax figures. There was no sign of a struggle, no furniture was overturned. Benny had seemingly sat there and allowed a killer to take his life, and his head, without moving an inch. Detroit police were paralyzed by the scene. They found over $2,000 in cash, a fortune in 1929, sitting in plain sight. It wasn't a robbery. Who could do this? Some blamed a disgruntled client who didn't get the miracle they paid for. Others pointed to a mysterious figure Benny mentioned in his writings named the Aura, a spirit he claimed he could communicate with. One suspect, Aurelius Williams, was arrested. He was a fellow mystic who had a falling out with Benny. But there was a problem. Williams was an old man, and the strength required to decapitate a man with a single blow and slaughter an entire family in minutes was far beyond him. There were no bloody clothes found. No weapon was ever recovered. It was as if a ghost had walked through the walls, committed a massacre, and vanished. The house at 3587 St. Aubin Street was eventually torn down. Today, it's just a patch of grass. But neighbors for decades claimed that on hot July nights, you can still hear the faint sound of footsteps descending those basement stairs, and the scratching of a pen on paper, as if the prophet is still trying to write the end of his book. What happened in the great beyond? Was it a man with an axe, or did Benny Evangelist finally invite something into his basement that he couldn't control? Tell me your theories in the comments. Was this a ritual killing, or something even darker? A 13-year-old girl walks into a pencil factory to pick up her paycheck. She never walks out. At 3 a.m., a night watchman stumbles through the pitch-black coal cellar and trips over her body. Her face is covered in soot. A cord is wrapped around her neck. And next to her, 2 handwritten notes trying to frame an innocent man. But here's the twist. The wrong person was convicted. The wrong person was unalived by a mob. And the real killer? He walked free and was never held accountable. This is the story of the body in the coal cellar, a case so twisted it ignited race riots, destroyed lives, and still haunts Atlanta over a century later. Atlanta, Georgia, April 26, 1913. It was Confederate Memorial Day, a public holiday in the South. The streets were filled with parades, and most of the city had the day off. But 13-year-old Mary Phagan had to work. Well, technically, she just had to pick up her paycheck, $1.20 for the week. Mary was a child laborer at the National Pencil Factory, one of thousands of kids working in dangerous conditions for pennies. She lived with her mother in a modest home in Marietta, but she'd taken the trolley into downtown Atlanta that morning. She was wearing a lavender dress with a big bow, and witnesses said she seemed excited. It was a holiday, after all, and she had plans to see the parade after collecting her pay. At 12:03 p.m., she walked through the factory doors. The building was nearly empty. Most workers had the day off. Inside, only a handful of people remained. The factory superintendent, Leo Frank, the janitor, Jim Conley, and the night watchman, Newt Lee. Mary walked up to the second-floor office, collected her $1.20 from Leo Frank, and then she vanished. Hours passed. The sun set. The factory went silent. At 3 a.m., the night watchman, Newt Lee, began his rounds. He needed to use the restroom, the one designated for colored workers in the basement. The basement of the National Pencil Factory wasn't just a storage area. It was a coal cellar, a grimy, suffocating pit filled with coal dust, broken machinery, and dirt floors. There was no electric light down there. Newt Lee carried a lantern. As he stepped into the darkness, his foot hit something soft. He stumbled. At first, he thought it was a pile of rags or a sack of coal that had fallen. But when he bent down and struck a match, the dim light revealed the truth. It was a body, a child's body. Mary Phagan was lying face down on the dirt floor near the furnace. Her face was blackened with coal dust and scratches. Her lavender dress was torn and covered in soot. A cord, made from the factory's own materials, was wrapped tightly around her neck. She had been strangled. But the most chilling detail? 2 notes were found near her body. These weren't ordinary notes. They were crudely written, full of misspellings, and clearly designed to throw suspicion away from the real culprit. The first note read, "He said he would love me and land down play like the night witch did it, but that long, tall, black Negro did by his sleff." The second note was similar, rambling, incoherent, and written to make it look like a black man had committed the crime. The term night witch was slang used to degrade the night watchman, Newt Lee. The police immediately suspected the notes were fake. Why? Because if someone had truly attacked Mary in a panic, why would they stop to write 2 bizarre notes in broken English? It was a setup. But a setup by whom? The investigation moved quickly, too quickly. Within days, the superintendent Leo Frank was arrested. He was a Jewish man from the North, educated and an outsider in the deeply segregated South. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. Anti-Semitic newspapers ran headlines calling him a predator and a monster. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on the testimony of Jim Conley, the factory's janitor. Conley claimed that Leo Frank had called him upstairs on the day of the incident and confessed to harming Mary. He said Frank ordered him to help move the body to the basement and even told him to write the notes to frame Newt Lee. But here's the problem. Jim Conley changed his story 4 times. First, he said he wasn't even at the factory. Then he admitted he was there but didn't see anything. Then he said he helped move the body.
Then he said Frank made him do it. Each version was more elaborate than the last, and each time, the prosecution accepted it without question. Despite the inconsistencies, Leo Frank was convicted in a trial that was more about bigotry than evidence. He was sentenced to passing, but many believed he was innocent. In 1915, the governor of Georgia, John M. Slayton, reviewed the case and commuted Leo Frank's sentence to life in prison. He didn't believe Frank was guilty, but the public was enraged.
A mob calling themselves the Knights of Mary Phagan broke into the prison, dragged Leo Frank from his cell, and took him to Marietta, Mary's hometown, where they ended his life by hanging him from a tree. It was one of the most infamous acts of mob justice in American history. But the question remains, if Leo Frank didn't do it, who did? Modern investigators, forensic experts, and historians all point to the same person, Jim Conley. Conley was known to be violent. He had a record. He was seen washing what appeared to be blood from a shirt in the factory basement. And most importantly, his handwriting matched the notes found near Mary's body, despite his claim that Leo Frank dictated them. The theory is this: Jim Conley attacked Mary Phagan in the basement. When he realized what he'd done, he panicked and tried to cover it up by framing the night watchman. When that didn't work, he pointed the finger at Leo Frank, knowing the courts would believe a white janitor over a Jewish factory owner. In 1982, nearly 70 years after the incident, Leo Frank was posthumously pardoned by the state of Georgia. Not because they found him innocent, but because the state admitted he didn't receive a fair trial. But the body in the coal cellar never got justice. Jim Conley was never charged with Mary Phagan's harm. He continued to live in Atlanta, even served time for other offenses, but never faced consequences for what really happened in that basement. The National Pencil Factory is gone now, but the story lingers. Mary Phagan, a 13-year-old girl who just wanted her $1.20, became a symbol of injustice on every level. The wrong man was blamed, the wrong man was unalived, and the real monster? He walked free. So the next time you hear about a solved case, remember the coal cellar. Sometimes the truth gets buried in the dark. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think Jim Conley did it? And if you made it this far, you're part of the truth seekers. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next investigation.